the Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Hello and welcome back to the show. We are going to talk about Bliss investing, how investors can support and grow companies with empathy, compassion, love, and meaning. That's the topic today, and we are going to dive into that with our guest. I'm Stephen Zakash here again with Tulio Siragusa and Mike Lusky. Mike, introduce our guest today.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. And muy buenos dias to our listeners. See, we're a multilingual and an international podcast now. But welcome back to our listeners to the Bliss Business Podcast. In today's episode, we are super excited to introduce truly a trailblazer in the world of entrepreneurship and investment, Dr. Alicia Castillo Holley. Alicia's accomplishments are vast. She's an esteemed entrepreneur, an investor, and an academic with a track record of combining financial acumen, solid business practices with empathy and social impact, which we see today is super rare. And from her beginnings in Venezuela to becoming a global influencer, Alicia has dedicated her career to developing investment strategies that align both profit with purpose, which is really aligns well with what we are about as a show. Which, we know too, as investors today, you find it a challenge to find those things. So, since you're quite interested in this topic, in the episode today, we're going to learn about Alicia's unique approach to angel and venture capital investing, where she blends best practices from capitalism as well as socialism, while introducing authenticity, transparency, and kindness as an investor who does not just invest and pray. So what can you expect then by applying her insights, you might ask? Well, you can expect to transform your investment strategies, create stronger connections with stakeholders, and achieve financial returns without having to compromise emotional, social, and spiritual rewards. So with that, we're truly happy and excited to welcome Dr. Alicia Castillo Holley to the show. Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I mean, keep going. I don't have to say anything. It's like, wow.
You know what? I don't know. The listeners don't know, but you could keep going with, I don't know how many degrees you have, Alicia, but there's like a resume here. That, we should talk about time management sometime, like how you do it, because I'm sure you've got some tips that we can get into.
Yeah, my parents were teachers. My mom is a teacher. My dad was a professor. So education was very important to us. And I have a ton of degrees.
I'm going to talk about my mom for a second here. The word that I liked in there, Mike, on that intro was the kindness in there.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with a mother who was very entrepreneurial, hustled, created multiple businesses, challenged with polio, came to California with her husband and a couple of kids and $200 and had a lot of success. But as a woman in business, she had to deal with a lot of, misogyny and dismissiveness, and none of that slowed her down. Well, no, actually, let me change that. It did slow her down, but it did not stop her. She absolutely had to push harder. Yes, but none of that changed her kindness or her views on the types of businesses she would like to work with, whether they were good companies. And I do wish she had the resources like this conversation we're going to have today available to her back then. I know people will get a lot out of our discussion. So, Alicia, I can see my entrepreneurial roots from my mother, and that's also where I get a lot of my determination from. Tell us a little about your journey. Like, where did you get your determination and entrepreneurial spirit from?
Well, this is very interesting because I have never heard the word entrepreneurship until I was 35. And I was already an accomplished scientist by then. I grew up in a little town called El Limón, the lemon. It's not even in the map. It has the population has shrunk. That gave me a lot of benefits. That's where I grew my socialism from. My dad passed away, but my parents were socialists. We grew up in a very interesting environment, unusual environment for for an investor. My dad thought that money was a source of evil. He lost a farm, and he became a professor. And I was a very smart student, so my parents didn't know what to do with me. I'm the second of 5, and as you mentioned, I grew up in Venezuela, and then every year I would pass with A+ all my subjects. That meant that I didn't have to take final exams in high school. And I'm not talking high school in Venezuela was very different. We would have 10 courses. My parents had a huge library. I read all of the books by the age of 13. I learned to read by myself when I was 3. I mean, I was a nightmare. I have a daughter who's like that. I was a nightmare for my parents. So what did I do? My dad took to some of the professors and said, I have this daughter who's very active, and we don't know what to do with her. Would you mind hiring her as a research assistant? So my first job at 13 or 14 was a research assistant for peanuts. And I would go to this immense room full of little dried peanut plants, and I would have to measure a ton of things of each one of them. And what it taught me a few things that I use all the time. One of them was pattern recognition. And I love math. So after a while, I started seeing that the distance between the root and the first branch was related to the yield. But that was not the original measurements that we were taking. And because I was so young, and I was a teenager, how teenagers, they always want to change the rule. I would go to the professor and say, "You're doing it wrong." If I had done that at 20, probably I wouldn't have done that. And so that was sort of my big breakthrough into science. I love science. I'm a scientist by training. I'm curious. I always second guess things, but not with malice, but with curiosity. And then when I was 15, I then work. I had a great reputation for, like a $2 a week salary. And then I work with insects, finding virus transmission in beans. Beans are very important source of protein in poor countries. And then I read a book about that, and I said, I want to dedicate my life to genetics, plant genetics, and I work on that for many, many years. And I was the first person that discovered that beetles can transmit viruses, not because there's no virus in their mouth, but they have a plate. And, these are the capacity to see the details in 2-3 steps ahead. I use it for business all the time. And it's that curiosity. Have you thought about this? And then what's going to happen to us? And maybe the option is in this other area. And so that's how I started. And then one of my students, when I was in my 30s, in my 20s.
So we're still really pretty far away from like the entrepreneurial start. You're still deep in the lab and the research. And
I was a researcher for 15 years. I was very happy. And I was a professor. And one of my students asked me to have dinner with his boss because they were looking for somebody to lead product development at Bayer. Bayer and Shell had a joint venture. So I went and talked to them because I know a ton of students. And then who became my boss fell in love with my philosophy and about, okay, you are very curious. You change this, you change that. To this day, I grow a lot of my food organically. And he said, we really would like you to work with us. And I said, well, I like the lab. I like teaching. It's like, no, I drove a 28-year-old car that I fixed because I like cars too. And I'm an engineer by training. And so over the course of 6 months, we had several lunches. And I was always thinking, well, maybe I can introduce you to this person or that person. And eventually my Klaus told me, and on the side, I was learning German. So Klaus told me, you...
Just for good measure, right?
Yeah, I like learning. So I learned fast typography too.
Really? Okay.
I was just very active. My poor parents, it's like, really, it's like, oh, what are we going to do with this person? And then he said, I'm going to make you an offer you can refuse. And I laughed at his face. And my salary was public. and they pay me 7 times my salary. But he didn't start with that. He said, if you want to change industry, come inside and change it inside. You really know nothing about business, which was true. And, I like challenges. And he said, change it inside. We need people with your view of reducing the use of pesticides to work in a pesticide company. And I was writing papers about that in the local newspaper. And I was just very well known for that. And then he said, and I said, I can't leave the lab. I'm a scientist. I love going to the lab. And then in the university, he said, we'll give you 1 day free a week so you can go and work at the university. And the university doesn't have to cover your salary, because public universities were struggling. They always struggle. And so I thought about it. And he said, you can just go and take 1 day off and continue teaching and doing your research. And then he said, and we're going to pay you 7 times your salary. And when he said that, I laughed. And I said, you think you can buy everybody? And he said, I don't think we can buy everybody. I think we can support the best talent. We need you in the industry. And I was the only woman in that team. And then I remember driving to my parents' house, sitting with my dad. I was divorced. I had 2 kids. Sitting with my dad and say, I don't know what to do. And my dad is like, don't do it. You're going to sell your soul to the devil. Don't do it. Don't do it. And I remember going home and thinking, what do I want to do? And so I took a semester off from the university and I said, I'm going to try it for 6 months. And that was a great introduction to the business world. Bayer is an amazing company. So I worked for the Bayer side. Bayer side was technology and Shell was commercialization. I learned so much. I had a great team. It was the time of total quality management. We introduced that. I had all the support of my boss. I always had great ideas, and we had a system that I could give him one idea for 10 minutes once a week. And he's like, Miss Castillo, you're going to come again? I said, yes, I have this great idea. So we did a few things. We did the Committee for the Safe Use of Pesticides. I called all my colleagues because I had been a professor. So I knew a ton of people from universities, from the private industry. We created a group from the private industry, and the private industry led the change in laws to increase and improve the law on pesticides and the environmental laws. And so it was really interesting because he, true to his word, I was able to make the changes out in the industry that I couldn't make it at the university. I had a great team. We went from 4 to 14. Product launch went from 1 every 2 years to 14 per year, and then we closed the company. Closed the company because the amount of land being cultivated was decreasing, and Venezuela started going down the drain. I also started the German Foundation for teaching German in my town, in my city, in Maracay. I didn't work in the town. There was nothing in the town. It was like a suburb. And I was the industry representative to the government at 29. And I look like a kid. I still look young, but I really look like a kid. But a lot of people respected me from my career, but also from that curiosity and attention to details. So there's 2 things. So attention to details, thinking 2-3 steps ahead. And now the curiosity part comes in, and that leads to kindness, because when you're curious, you don't need to defend your position. And that creates a really, really virtuous circle. When I was at Bayer, and when they closed, I was always thinking, we can do a better job. Why can't we, Latinos, build these humongous companies? Why can't we do these? So my curiosity and my wish for learning went into, how do I know more about business? Because I have never seen a P&L. It just was not in my vocabulary. I heard the word assets and liabilities when I did my MBA. And, it's just, people have no clue how other people live in other worlds, because there is a system that allows people to do that. And there are many people who live like that. So when I was at Bayer, I thought I need to learn about business. And I decided I was going to do an MBA, but I didn't know where. And I went to Boston, to Harvard. I got an interview, and then I went back and I said, they're going to kill my kids in Boston, because in Cambridge, because my kids came from a little town. I mean, we were barefooted, we walk everywhere, we were hiking. It's just very, very laid back. I went to work early in the morning, and then I came home. My kids were, sometimes they were home alone. It was just really, really laid back, little town, lovely, lovely environment to grow. And then I decided I'm going to do an MBA. And when I was applying to colleges in Massachusetts, in Cambridge, because I was certain I was going to get into Harvard, that I didn't get in twice, or MIT, because that's the only thing I knew. I bumped into Babson, and I had never heard the word entrepreneurship before. So I started asking people, what is entrepreneurship? You think about it. You go from academia in a socialist country, in a socialist town, in a socialist parents. You go from academia to a corporate world. I had no clue what entrepreneurship was. I had started 2 companies, but I didn't know that was entrepreneurship at all. And so I remember asking somebody, what is entrepreneurship? I said, oh, those crazy people that they do cookies and they do, it's like, okay, no, I don't want to do that. And so I applied to Babson. Babson gave me a scholarship. Boston College, Boston University gave me a scholarship. And I actually picked Babson because it was in Wellesley, which is a little town. And Babson transformed my life. I'm a Babson fellow. I am on the Founders Club. A lot of my state is going to Babson because it helped me think completely different about the business world. And then when I was at Babson, it clicked, and I said, this is what we need in Latin America. And that's why I wanted to make the introduction I wanted to I have this socialism and capitalism balance, because there are 2 sides of the same coin. That's why they don't see each other, because they're on the other side. But we cannot progress without social economic development. We can't progress. And entrepreneurship breaks the barrier of who do we take it from. I'm just going to write an article about the taxes that we need to pay to support our growth in the US. And that's going to come from entrepreneurial venture. It's not going to come from people who have wealth. It's not going to come from people that work. It's going to come from the new companies that we need to grow. That's how I got to entrepreneurship. And I could not pick a better place. I mean, I love Babson. The professors gave me their phone number. It's like, little town mentality. And I was the only woman with kids, and I was single mom. So I struggle a lot with that. I learned the hard way that the US is not made to support single moms. So I'm very supportive of single moms or single dads. The same thing with single dads. And then I decided I'm going to take entrepreneurship to Latin America. And I went to, well, actually before that, I had to decide where I wanted to raise my kids, because I didn't want to raise my kids in the US. I was afraid. It's a lot of pressure. I have a lot of sympathy for parents here, because they get a lot of pressure. Men and women, there's no compassion. So that kind of is in the back of my mind all the time. And you always have to show your best. And that's why I love what Tulio does, because you have to be this, super perfect person. And that's so boring and so stressful. And, why don't you just go and say a bad word or cry, and it's just perfect. And then I went to the library and I printed 140 countries, and I started crossing. And that's what Babson does to you. You make the world that you want to do. You just create it. So I started crossing, and then I came up with four countries: Switzerland, because I had worked in Switzerland; Thailand, because I'd been to Thailand; Chile, and Argentina. And I was a poor person. I couldn't afford. I had 14 credit cards. I mean, it was a big mess. I also lost all my money in Venezuela. I had enough money, which was not a lot, but it was enough for me. I had enough money to support myself and my kids for 2 years, and the banks closed, and the people that owned the bank stole the money. So and then this was 2 weeks before I had to go, and I said, I'm going to go anywhere. So I went. I didn't have money to pay ticket back. We ate in boxes. I mean, we slept in the floor. I told my kids, this is how people sleep in the US, in the floor. And of course, you're in,
You know that, so just,
you don't know that. So in spring, when they go to their friend's house, they're like, people have beds here. I'm like, oh, really? I didn't know that. And our house was so cold that you could see the vapor of your coming out of your mouth. And I told my kids, they are so smart that they make these to teach kids how to read. So let's do an A. And they believe that. So it was really, really cool. And you have to use humor. That's why I don't get stressed about anything. But that made me think I want to take entrepreneurship. And then I picked Chile, and I moved to Chile with a business plan.
This is where you got involved more on the investing side,
No, that's just entrepreneurship until now.
Okay.
It's entrepreneurship. We need to take this to Chile. I did have a great network in Boston. The Center for Entrepreneurship at Harvard was founded by a friend of mine, Jeff Timmons, who passed away, and he was at the Center of Entrepreneurship. He was a big mentor for me. And Julian Lang and Steve Spinelli, who is the first course of Steve Spinelli was mine. And Steve Spinelli taught us about franchise. And so it's, again, business model patterns. How do you grow fast? And Steve Spinelli is now the president of Babson College. And I had a great network. So I said, I'm going to start a Center for Entrepreneurship in Latin America. I started the first one. There was one in Cali, but I started the first one in Chile. And then when I was in Chile, I realized it was completely self-funded. The university gave me 4 months, and I was knocking on doors, very entrepreneurial, very Babson, knocking on doors. I don't have any money, but I'm knocking on doors and say, okay, how do I deal with this? How do I do a little consulting so I can get this? And I spoke Spanish, which is a plus. And other people thought this crazy American, because I'm Venezuelan, but I look white, like my sister says. I have the white costume on, and so a lot of people say, well, what are you doing? And they were very intrigued by that. I started the first Center for Entrepreneurship. And then within a year, I realized entrepreneurship without venture capital doesn't go anywhere. So I started a consulting company with 9 people. They were all guys. And we took Chilean companies to Boston to raise money. And that lasted 2 years. And then I had a group of 35 companies raising money that they were really, really good. So I started talking to other people, and I had a research company, because I'm an academic, had a research company that had a research project, a multi-million-dollar research project with Canada for encouraging angel investing in the southern corners of Latin America. And being very academic, I did the research methodology. I interviewed 1,300 people. I did pattern recognition. I said, I'm going to start a seed fund. So 4 years after being in Chile, I started the first fund, and it was very successful. And then I was on the committee for Chile for the launch of biotech industry, which didn't work. And I did the whole programming for developing entrepreneurial education in Chile with some help of the US and Canada and some colleagues in Brazil. But and the center in Cali, in Colombia, and then we went to Monterrey. So I was very, very active. I mean, talk about being active. I was very, very active. I could have done all of that because I had a living maid and I had a chauffeur. And people underestimate how hard it is to be a single mom. But in Latin America, you have more support. You have real support. So people are not going to tell you, oh, you're a bad mom because you can't be at your son's thing. I was always late. You can be at your son's things. People are going to say, okay, you can't be there. I'm going to be there for you. We need that. So it's that kindness. Again, okay, how can we support each other? And then that's how I started into venture capital. I've been doing this for more than 30 years. I made my money in venture capital. And to this day, I run an investment club for accredited investors, and I run a growth fund. And for me, I have to make money on venture capital. This is not a donation. I have a nonprofit. I have to make money. But my philosophy is I don't have to make money taking money away from people. And I don't have to make money being unkind to people.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. We talk about conscious capitalism a lot, and it's mostly from perspectives of the employees and the customers and the vendors and the environment and the community. And it's trying to get just this bigger perspective than just, the owner investor, where all of our KPIs are targeted toward that. And to build an organization, I guess, that pursues profit, but do it with love and higher meaning, if that makes sense, is kind of the shift of that conscious capitalism, and maybe what you're talking about from that role of entrepreneurship being the bridge between capitalism and socialism. It's trying to find this sweet spot in there where you're considering not just the individual but the group, and more holistic approach. Talk about, from the investor side, investing with heart and the things the many things that means to you.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So first thing, if you're an investor, don't watch programs that make investors look mean. It's not good for you. It's not good for your mental health. So the first thing is that you need to have empathy with the founders. For a founder, the general perception that they need to go and ask for money, it's also tied to, I'm not good enough. Because if I were smart enough, I would have figured it out on my own. So I see a lot of that outside of Silicon Valley. And we need to break that. And we break that through kindness. And when you are kind, you open authentic communication. So that is one thing. The other thing is, I only invest in things that are going to give me spiritual benefits as well as money. I don't separate them. It's like I put them in the same coin. Now, that means that there are great companies that I don't have my heart in, and I'm not going to invest in. There are companies that fit that bucket. Now, not everybody can invest in a company, but everybody can help an entrepreneur. Everybody can help an entrepreneur. And this is one thing that we need to do as a society. And we don't help an entrepreneur by telling an entrepreneur, go, you're great. No, we help an entrepreneur by telling them, by taking our time to say, let me see how I can help you. And sometimes it is telling them, don't do this, because if you think 2 steps ahead, you're making money for yourself, but you're not making money for the community. If you don't make money for the community and you're only making money for yourself, you're never going to grow. We don't experience that because we grow up in America. We grow up in a system where the perception is that to get ahead, it is okay to screw everybody. And I hope this is not a bad word, but
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit, Alicia. By the way, you've got fans. Here's a nice comment. Someone took your quote. I have to make money, but I don't have to make money by taking money away from people. I don't have to make money by being unkind to people. So good. So in line with that, thank you, Anthony, for sharing that with us. And thank you for all who are watching. If you have questions for Alicia, you can type them in your comments. We will see them and you might get featured. Who knows? But along those lines, and that quote, which I think is really appropriate for this question, what challenges do you face in promoting empathy in the investment community? It is historically been known for being more of a survivalist kind of like dog eat dog kind of world. So you're infusing a different principle, this principle of, hey, you can do this with love and empathy and care. How do you help them overcome the sort of programming for all these years where it's like, it's a dog eat dog world? How's that coming along for you?
That is a great question. So I do that by showing results. So I have a great track record as an investor. That also means that I don't take, can I say BS?
Yeah.
I take BS, everybody, and people know that. So having empathy doesn't mean that you're going to be a pushover. Now, a lot of investors, a lot of LPs and investors don't trust what you say because they tend to think that in order to get ahead, you have to damage somebody else. So the only way I can prove that is through results. Also, I pick the founders because not every founder is kind to investors, especially if you're a woman, because they think, oh, you're stupid, give me the money and go away. And there's one thing that I think I told you is we don't invest in prey. We don't do that. I only invest in companies where we can add a ton of value. That means that a lot of founders are willing to give us the opportunity to invest a little bit of money in their very huge rounds. So at the investment club, we have 5 unicorns. We don't get access to great deals. You only get access to great deals if you have a lot of money or you have a great human connection. So you also pick the founders. On that same line, we have an investment club. We don't accept everybody to the investment club. And we have an investment club where we have people that are completely diverse in gender, in political affiliations, families, education. And we are able to create a group where we can communicate, and our questions are better because we're very diverse. And they can see that. So I see that at the investment club, we're opening opportunities to collaborate beyond just making investments. But the biggest challenge is that the assumption that to be a successful investor, you have to be mean. That is the biggest challenge, both for founders and for investors. And I'm a senior Latina woman, and the expectation is I need to be kind, which I am a kind person, but the expectation is I'm going to be stupid and I have a lot of money. I don't have a lot of money. I made my money. I'm not going to lose that money. So if I see a business plan that is bad, I start with kindness. Can I give you? Am I allowed to give you feedback because I think your business could improve by doing some things? And usually people say yes. And I say, I can tell you the hard things that you don't want to listen, because my interest is that you're going to be successful. I'm not interested in being the egotistic one that you say, oh, she's good. You won't see me in a lot of, you won't see me in women only panel, because I believe that we need to work together. But it starts with, I do care for you as a human being. I want you to be successful. That doesn't mean I'm going to give you my money or my time. I'll just give you my suggestion now. So you have to be kind, but you have to, and authentic, but you have to set healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
So Alicia, that brings up a question for me. I'm kind of curious about maybe shifting over to or talking a little bit more about the investor side of things, right? What advice would you have for investors who want to try to align, their investments or their portfolios with their personal values and ethical principles? Let's call them. Like, what would you suggest for them?
That's a great question. So there's a lot of opportunities now to invest in this country. There's a ton of opportunities. So don't invest in things if you're not willing to put an extra time. Your most valuable asset is your time, your connections, your experience. So don't invest and pray. And reduce the number of investments that you have. So when you invest in the stock market, you have to really select the winners based on a lot of things. When you invest in an early stage, I don't invest in startups anymore. They're a little bit older, but I share them with over 60 VCs. So we're very collaborative. But when you invest in the stock market, you have to pick winners. When you invest in an entrepreneur, you have to make winners. So make sure that you add value, that you're recognized as a valuable contributor, roll up your sleeves and don't let them fail. So that is our secret sauce, is to only invest in companies where we can add a ton of value. And that involves our capacity to interact with them. It's a phone call with a potential client that is going to take the phone call in 10 minutes. It's going to tell them, this is how you sell to us, or we're not going to buy because of this. Instead of spending a year trying to push a sale, you can do that. So those are the kind of things that I think you can do it. And say no. I mean, you can, but it's make winners. Don't invest and pray. And you can start with 2 or 3. You don't need to do 25. They say you have to do 30 to be successful. That's rubbish. You don't need to do 30 to be successful. I mean, if you have enough money to throw to 30, yes, one will do it. But if you roll up your sleeves and work with them and you have the capacity to help them, that's what you should do.
And then I think it would go so far as to say that then you have to feel as though the company really aligns with maybe your mission and your purpose, right? Would you agree with something like that?
Yeah.
Well, I think that begs the question too, how much energy or focus do you put into seeing or investing in companies that actually have taken the time to define their purpose, to define their values? How important are these, in identifying strategically the right kind of investment as well. Does that play any role into determining what is better than not for you?
Yes.
What do you
Yes, and then the other thing is, when I moved here, I joined Sand Hill Angels, which was at that time the largest angel group. I'm also a member of Angels, which is now the largest angel group. So join a group. You won't be able to do it alone. Join a group and learn. Be curious and learn. And if a group doesn't give you the opportunities to learn, not just to invest, but to learn and collaborate, then leave that group and join another one, or create one yourself. But you can't do this alone. It's not worth it. It's too expensive. One of the things that we do very well now, because I have 90 companies in my portfolio. So it's like we create hubs. And then we have these 5 companies that can benefit. So one is plant-based, but then one serves agriculture. And I said, hey, that strategy could serve you. We just put in touch to companies that are related to cancer. We do a lot of health tech, diagnostic. Because I work at Bayer in product development, diagnostic tools are really, really essential for product development. And you don't have to have FDA approval. We're just experimenting, and we need better tools to develop products. So that is a great source of income. One thing we started doing last month is we're going to evaluate companies to invest in earnings first. So we say, okay, can we help this company increase earnings? So sometimes it's revenue, sometimes it's demos. And we are, because capital is so constrained now, we're really, really focused on how can we do that. Now, when you talk about supporting a company, it's not about number of hours, it's about impact. Can I do one phone call that is going to create $1 million for this company? That is the type of things that we can all do. Can I call this company that I invested, or can I call this other investor, or can I call this person to help me help the company, not judge the company? That's a shift.
So we have a question again. You have a fan here, Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. One of the questions he asks on LinkedIn: for individuals who may not have the available capital to directly invest in VC, how can we approach investing with empathy? I think that's a really great question. Along the lines of this conversation, what would you answer to that?
So first thing is that you have that goal in mind. So that's the biggest shift. Then you already have it. It is possible to make a lot of money with empathy and invest smart. You can do crowdfunding for $100, and I believe it's not a lot of money. But for $100, you're not going to have a lot of influence in the company that you invest. But in your local community, there are small business owners and there are entrepreneurs in your local community. So try to reach out to them, maybe create a group and start by having lunches or things like that. So you get comfortable with that. Go to YouTube, get trained. Most angel groups have a minimum investment of $3,000. Our investment club has a minimum investment of $5,000, but we don't have a minimum investment as a whole. If people want to invest in a company, the minimum investment in that particular company is $5,000. But most angel groups will allow you to invest $3,000 to $5,000 as a minimum investment, and you can just do 2 or 3. Don't go solo, because $5,000 is not going to help any company. But if you have a group of 50 people, then $5,000 is going to go a long way.
Nice, thank you.
That's a great response, Alicia. So one of the things we talked about a little bit earlier. Within Zero Company, we have a number of clients that provide ETFs or mutual funds or investment products, right? And the last few years, or maybe the past decade, we saw ESG spawn up, right, as this started to gain fanfare in the investment world. But I'm kind of curious if we could use maybe your ability to sort of look maybe 2-3 steps down the road. What are some of the future trends that you foresee for the investment landscape, but really in particular to the point of empathy and ethical investing? And then maybe you've spawned a little bit of curiosity within me too, and probably also for our listeners. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Wealthing VC Club?
You're so kind. Thank you so much. So let's go back a little bit. One of the things that I learned the hard way was to filter the people that I interact with. So this is an industry that can be very toxic, like all the industries, really. Let me get some water. Sorry.
Sure.
Quickly, somebody tell a joke. We're live.
Good. I love it. So humor is good, and having fun is good. So going back to kindness and empathy, we don't talk a lot about kindness and empathy. That's why we're so polarized. So to me, and I just had this conversation with an emerging VC manager that has a huge VC. She comes from private equity, and she's struggling with some of their limited partners because they're very aggressive towards her fund, not towards her fund. But so try to get a tribe that values kindness. Kindness has to do with authenticity. And when somebody tells me a lie, or when somebody crosses the respect boundaries, I call them up on that. And unfortunately, some social relationships have suffered on that. But I have to be true to my values. And you're always consistent on that. We need to talk more about that. If you see a founder doing something that they shouldn't be doing, you need to talk about that. But if you see an investor, you should talk about that. We need better people investing. You know what they told me at the agrochemical company? We need to be better investors, and they are good investors. They are people that if they're in the cap table, I don't invest in the companies because they're going to damage the founders and they're going to damage us. So we don't invest. I have my own list. So that it's the capacity to separate the good people from the bad apples. It's critical, and to continue working on that. Avoid polarization, avoid judgment, avoid talking about this or that. You have the privilege to see a company, to invest in that company. It's a privilege that you have. And this company is trying to make things in. And we need more good investors that are that have that kindness and that love. This is another human being. So that I think is the edge that if there's one thing people can take out of this conversation, is that. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. And then in terms of like, how do you apply that with the wealthing fund?
So at the club, so the fund is a growth fund. So the diamonds of the fund of the club go to the fund. So at the club, what we do is we filter around 70 companies per month, and then we pick one and we do a deep due diligence on that. And we have 6 or 8 that are extraordinary, but I don't have enough money to invest in all of that, and I don't have the brain space to do that either. So we share that with around 60 VCs. Very collaborative. We never invest more than 20% of the round. We always do the last check. So you can leverage on that. And that I learned in Silicon Valley. And we never invest alone. No, we never do that. It's a tribe thing. And then we're very collaborative. We only take memberships once a year, and it passed. So we'll probably open memberships in January. But you can do your own club. And if you want to do your own club and you want some help, let me know.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Alicia, we've had a lot of conversations on this show about how consciousness is evolving, in society, and then business kind of going along with that in the course of history. They're evolving too, with that consciousness. But sometimes it's almost like they're evolving and they're kicking and screaming at times, going along with the pain that they have to go through. And we've covered a lot of business scandals recently where almost what it came down to on a lot of them, there are a variety of reasons, but a lot of them, it was that they were missing the higher purpose that aligned everybody. Do you think more and more businesses are going to understand the importance of the higher purpose as time goes on? It just feels inevitable to me. I feel like I'm having more conversations with founders that start evolving around that and start talking about their higher purpose and helping them define that. What do you think? Is this just inevitable? Is this the future? Like we're talking 20, 30 years from now, more and more businesses are going to align with some type of higher purpose?
It depends which country you are. So I have a PhD in finance. And one of the things that I noticed when I was doing my PhD in life sciences is that unless society has a space for people to be vulnerable and not be threatened that they're going to lose their life, we cannot have a space for altruism. And that's missing in America. So you and I can talk about altruism, but not enough people go across the streets to ask their neighbor how they're doing. And we need to do that. And we don't do that because it's vulnerable to us. We don't want to be show off like we're helping them, but we never ask for help. And I'm guilty of that too. So the higher purpose comes when you have a safety net. Now, I have my safety net and I built it. And for me, that was urgent. So being an immigrant in another country means that you have to make it work. We are not very kind to immigrants, by the way, and we should be kinder to immigrants because they don't have the safety net. You can't call anybody.
Can you say that again? Just say that again. Just say it one more time.
We need to be kinder. Well, we need to be kinder to immigrants because they don't have a safety net. And you know, my daughter was a foster mom, and these kids, the kids that she had, 4 kids, out of 9, she had 9 siblings. You know, one of them at the end was living on the streets when she was 10 years later, and they brought her back. And we don't relate to people who have nothing. We just don't. I mean, look at all the things that I have, all the pictures there. So it's really, really difficult for us to understand that. And we're privileged to talk about altruism and higher purpose, but really, how are we going to bring the rest of those humans who are not there? And what are the things that we can do to help the people who have nothing? That is the change that we have. We don't need that change in corporations where we have, you know, if I lose my home now, I'll go, if there's an earthquake now that we're waiting for, I'll go to a hotel. I take a flight. I mean, it's like, but if somebody who lives in a trailer loses the trailer, they don't have anything. And they don't have the social tribe to help them. And just trying to understand those people is really important to be more humane. So I'm a mentor in a group called ENG. It helps Ukrainians practice English. And I put it on my LinkedIn as well. 1 hour a month. I'm talking to an Ukrainian person to help them improve their English because they're going to need that for their work. And it opens up a world of possibilities for me because otherwise I would never talk to that person. Go and talk to a shelter. So we're talking higher purpose, but we're not really talking about higher purpose.
Can we have you co-host with us more often, Alicia? We need to do like segments just with you because I mean, you know, it's resonating big time.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, you do have like that Maslow hierarchy of needs where people can't kind of think about some higher purpose when they're just thinking about, you know, how am I going to put food on the table a lot of times. And so I feel like corporations and businesses, though, that are there, that have made it, could really do a better job at helping those people that are not sure about their next meal, not sure about, you know, how they're going to keep the electric on. And that for those, there's really this bridge again, maybe of entrepreneurship, like we were talking about, capitalism. And that to me is where kind of the love in business can come in. And I know in the investment world, like you're talking about, you've got a lot of very aggressive people who, you know, don't want to talk about that. I know a few. But what do you say to someone who says empathy and love doesn't belong in business, particularly when it comes to investing? Maybe they just want to see numbers.
Well, I want to see numbers. I just don't just numbers. Yeah, you're right.
I want my KPIs for this, but I also want maybe some KPIs or some focus on the love aspect or the empathy aspects too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's hard to.
I don't think we know how to measure.
We don't have the conversations.
We don't have conversations about that because we're all busy. But I did write a book called Falling in Love with Your Life. because my daughter was depressed and she was suicidal at one point, and it was a struggle for us, for all of us as a family, and of course for her. I mean, and I'm very happy that she survived and she still talks to me, and we have this great relationship, but it was really stressful. We don't know. And now a lot of people are talking about mental health. There's a lot of apps about that. You don't know the impact that you can have in a person. And right now, I hope that after this conversation, whoever is here can go out today and have one act of kindness to another person. It makes you a better person. And you don't have to talk. You have to do. Now, it's very easy to judge and to say, oh, this is what other people should do. But we need to have that introspection. What am I going to do today to be kind? And use kindness as an act of practice. Practice kindness so it becomes a habit.
That's the key. That's just like systemize it. Make it a system.
Yeah.
Like,
it's
don't
like
make it a one-off event. Try and make it something where suddenly it's just a practice.
Yeah.
It's a practice. Yeah. I mean, you have your copy, it's a practice, and make it a practice. And then you become a nicer person. You become a better person. It kind of contaminates. And then one thing is I don't watch TV. I don't watch the news. It's too stressful for me. So anything, and I'm very alert to that. Anything that is going to make me angry or anything that's going to make me judge others, I can see it, block it. Because
spot where people are making you disconnect. Spot those disconnections with them.
Yeah.
You have to safeguard yourself from
yes.
that.
Yes.
You got another fan here, Sylvia Dahmen. You're talking about high purpose and action. Love your way of thinking, leading, investing, Alicia. So thanks for watching, Sylvia.
And come and invest. We need more kind people to invest in.
Alicia, where can people learn more online about you and your work?
Oh my gosh. Just on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is the best place. Yeah. I did have a program called Women Get Funded. There's a lot of things that I put on YouTube over the years. And I found that my purpose is more aligned with investing and allowing people to invest in a kinder way than teaching people how to raise capital. Because there's a lot of people doing that. I want to invest, and I want to make money investing, and I want to show people that you can make money investing and being kind to people and having those rewards for yourself. Yeah.
Well, great conversation today. Thank you
So much.
As a reminder to our listeners, on Tuesdays, we do our regular series show. Wednesdays are our short topic, 10-minute segments. And Thursdays, we have our wonderful guests like Alicia. And we've just started to do our Thursday shows live, as you noticed. That's it for today. We will see you on the next Bliss Business Podcast.